printed, because he has to handle all those bags and
No agenda tonight?
getting a lot for him.
No agenda. He usually puts it out, I didn't see one.
What's the agenda?
I don't have any agenda.
There's nothing, it's just the same as it was, there's nothing there.
Not up there.
Yeah, those are the same as the check. Just didn't have any extras tonight.
Nothing extra on.
Ready? At this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Gilmer County Board of Education to order. Ms. Starkey,
Here?
Misty Britt,
Here.
Carl Harmer,
Here.
Tom Ratliff,
Here.
all here and accounted for. I would like at this time to ask Dr. Carl Harmer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, do we have any special recognitions?
No, sir.
Okay, we move on to item 4, board reports. Gilmer Calhoun Technical Center, Mrs. Starkey.
We've discussed this once before, there's the minutes in there.
There is no report from the Gilmer Vo-Tech Center.
There's minutes in there. I made a promise, I have to repeat this again, I made a promise to Mr. Blankenship, unless he said it's not one of his items, then I'm not to say anything in board meeting.
Are you willing to submit a report to us in writing?
The report is right here in the minutes.
Mr. Superintendent, does that meet your
Yes. I
satisfaction?
think everything we discussed is pretty well identified in this.
Okay, very good. I think that the new emphasis on the tie between our vocational and technical schools and our traditional programs in public education is going to be very, very significant as we move ahead. So I think that this board in the months and years ahead we're certainly going to be involved a lot more in our discussions of vocational education. Okay, RESA 7, we actually have not had a formal meeting since January, but as a follow-up, we're continuing discussions on the Common Core standards, and a little bit later in the meeting we'll discuss some of the key points in what RESA 7 is doing. RESA 7 is actually becoming the vehicle through which most of the training and discussion of the Common Core standards and the implementation will be conducted. All right, item 5, the trip requests. We have one before us.
Did you want to discuss anything about the meeting, school board meeting,
The
conference, school board conference? Did you want to say anything about that?
The school board conference that we had this weekend, we had a lot of people there, Tom and Carl and Misty, and you talk about a load of information. I think we all felt totally saturated, but we had a wonderful program involving a number of speakers on the issue of the current problems in public education, the efforts to do educational reform. There are, as you're aware, a number of bills before the legislature at this time which would rather dramatically change the focus in public education, hopefully free up public schools from some of the restrictions and constraints that have been there that have really, in the minds of most of us, been detrimental rather than helpful. We had some conversations from Congressman Nick Rahal. He's certainly behind our efforts to improve public education. I think we all felt in some way overwhelmed with the complexity of what it's going to take to reform education. I came away from there with the idea that this isn't going to happen overnight, that basically what we're going to have to see is a cultural change. We didn't get where we are overnight, and we're not going to be able to change it overnight. Implementing new standards in the classroom is just one aspect of it. What we do with how we evaluate the effectiveness of what we do in the classroom under new standards is yet to be explored. We have a whole host of training to do to get us all acclimated as to what the new standards encompass. And so I think where we are now in public education is the beginning of a journey, which 5 years from now, I think we'll be better able to assess whether we have undertaken the right direction or whether we have to make further adjustments. Tom, Misty, Carl, you were all there. Do you have observations you'd like to make?
Well, what I would say tracks pretty closely with yours, but the presentation that really appealed to me was Kathy D. and Tony. And she talked about what's on the drawing board for the vocational or the career centers. And what she was talking about was doing everything they can to get the young people involved and do various things like they're starting a program, but each child who enrolls in one of these programs, they're going to be put with a group of others, and they're going to work as if they're in a business. And they're going to learn bookkeeping, the importance of attendance, teamwork, and they're going to put this in some format so at the end of the year they can put a dollar value. They make money or lose money. And it was just fascinating, the innovations there to give a jump start to those programs. And she's a wonderful speaker, and I'd say you're gonna hear a lot from her in the future. I came in, Dr. Simmons, I lost my packet, so I had to get her name written down. She is the State Superintendent of Schools, Division of Technical and Adult Education.
And likewise, that was a session that stood out to me. It was one of the very last sessions of the conference. And they said over the course of 3 to 5 years, all career and technical centers across West Virginia will have this program, as Carl speaks about. There's been 15 sites selected for the 2013-14. We're not among those 15 pilot sites, but that may serve to our advantage because they're kind of trial sites, and then maybe by the time it gets to Gilmer County, maybe it'll be perfected a little bit, but it's like simulated workplaces. And they're trying to get business and industry to buy into the concept of it as sponsors, maybe even to award the businesses at the end of the year, bonuses, just real life experiences. They also talked about another factor would be because of the fact that they work with heavy equipment and sometimes dangerous equipment, they're going to even implement drug screenings of these. This is going to be like a real life experience for these kids. They're going to apply for the positions. They're going to be interviewed. It's going to be real life for them, and just like he said, they'll get a dollar value assigned for attendance. They'll get a dollar value assigned for good test scores, and at the end, that's going to be pass or fail for them. And it's really a neat idea, and they're hoping that with the partnership of business and industry, that it'll be a success. But she was really excited about the program. She couldn't speak highly of it enough, and she has a good background in career technical. So, and they've also talked about a project in Mingo County where they're going to start with 9th graders, and there'll be criteria set forth for those, and it's already in place in Mingo County. So I'll be excited to see how that ends up. Is coupling that with an associate degree. Once they are ready to graduate, they won't just graduate with a high school diploma, but in the field that they perfect at the Career Center, leaving there with an associate degree. and they talked about math components and science components, also accounting for high school credits, because there's a lot of math and science involved with a lot of the career technical skills that they do. So I thought that was the most interesting session we had.
Well, I certainly think a lot went into putting that conference together, and I think, again, one of the keys with regard to your discussion, students who currently take English and other basic courses in the vocational centers, that's going to count as though they took it in the regular high school, so that we're not discriminating. If you have a qualified English teacher teaching students at the vocational center, they're going to get the same credit for that English class that a student who would take it in a ninth grader or as a sophomore in the high school. So I think what we're doing is we're seeing breaking down of some barriers which have negatively impacted students. I think one other thing that a lot of us have talked about for a number of years is that our community and technical colleges have operated somewhat in isolation from the vocational and career centers in our public schools. I think over the next few months you're going to see the merging of efforts in these two entities. There is no reason why a student who's a sophomore in a vocational center cannot pursue a seamless path through to a community college program. And if he wants to go 2 years to the community college or 1 year or whatever, starting as a sophomore or wherever he starts in public schools, there should be a clear path where he can go beyond that high school level and see a career out there at the end. So I think we're beginning to talk what I consider some very sensible approaches to making it a lot less of an obstacle for a student to achieve an educational goal. But, you know, this is the first time for a number of years that I have seen this much emphasis on the need for us to develop skills as well as to prepare people to go to college. Because there are a lot of folks who can find meaningful lives and a profitable vocation without getting a degree in a college or university. And I think we're beginning to open that discussion up. And I think that I came away from this conference with that feeling, and we heard from the state superintendent who urged us to do what we felt was in the best interest of our students. And if there are impediments, we should weigh those impediments against the goals that we need to achieve. And he was actually telling us, you know, use some common sense approaches and do what you feel will make the best educational program for your students. And, you know, this is just the beginning of the discussion. And as I say, I think 3 or 4 years from now, we're going to see this come to fruition. It's going to take a while. When you make as much of a change as we're going to be making, we have to do it in public education as people involved. The public is going to have to also understand the nature of the changes in order for parents to know, well, here's what is going to be expected. If my child isn't reading at grade level, at grade 3, we're going to have to spend a little extra time, because that's a very critical point in that child's learning to read, and that's going to impact everything he does in the rest of his education. And I think we're at an exciting time. It's a transitional time, almost revolutionary. As I said the last time, those of us who were in school in the late 50s and early 60s, this is very familiar. And I think it worked then, and hopefully it will work now. When we talk about mathematics, as we isolate algebra and geometry and other areas in math, we've segregated them. The new approach in the Common Core standards will be to bring these disciplines together in a way that students learn to think mathematics rather than to solve a problem in algebra, and not be able to transfer that knowledge over to another situation requiring a skill in mathematics. So we're just beginning. It's like the tip of the iceberg. We're just beginning, but it's exciting. And again, I think 5 years from now, we'll be proud of the results. But there, as Mr. Blankenship can attest, there are many, many meetings going on now. A lot of discussion. Now, what comes out of it concretely, we've yet to see. But we're at least on the way, and we're at least discussing it, and it's good, open, honest discussion. No, we're not the best here, and no, we're not the best there. We're 43rd or we're 45th, and we got to change that. And I think that's the goal. We're going to bring ourselves up from where we are in terms of educational achievement.
Yeah, you all probably know that Dr. D'Antoni's got quite a famous brother. He's the coach of the New York Knicks, or I'm sorry, the LA Lakers.
Really?
Yeah, Mike D'Antoni.
Who was that?
Kathy D'Antoni, she's the vice, but she's assistant superintendent for CTE, Computer Technical Education in West Virginia. Her brother Mike is now coaching with for the LA Lakers.
I think that what I was enthused about is that it's going to take almost a retraining of how we think education ought to be. And I've thought this for a long time. There's sort of a stigma attached to the kid that wants to go to the Career Center. And in the focus group that I was in, that's not just in Gilmer and Calhoun County, that's all over the state, you know. And I think we need to realize that there's some very intelligent students that want to be an electrician, they want to be a carpenter, or they want to be a plumber. And we need every one of those people to make our economy grow. And somehow or another, we got to get over this stigma, you know, of kids that want to go to the Career Center. And I can almost tell you that there's a lot of kids right here at this high school would have loved and went to the Career Center, but didn't go because of peer pressure or whatever. The stigma's attached to it. And hopefully we can, through retraining and things, that we can get over that, and these kids that want to pursue that line of a vocation can go forth full tilt, and by being able to integrate their math skills, because a good qualified carpenter has got to have great math skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can pick that up while they're going to vocational school, right in with their vocation that they're studying for. And I think also, as this progresses, we're going to find out that higher education is going to have to change their teaching somewhat in the way they've been educating their future teachers. It's going to change, and they're going to have to change in the way they work.
Bob the top, you know, years ago, of course, it's been a lot of years. I can't remember when we did start that, but we used to teach English 12. We taught physics 1 year at the Career Center, and it was part of the attempt that we were making to try to reduce that stigma we had with vocational education. And it enabled several students who weren't able to go, especially because of the English 12, an opportunity to go to the center and spend a half a day. That might be something that we want to look at in the future too.
That's true, and I can remember a day when West Virginia Institute of Technology was regarded as one of the best engineering schools in the country, and you didn't get into that school without having a lot of work in math and in vocational education because you just simply couldn't make it. And I think that a lot of what's happened in public and higher education, we've become too much attuned to the social aspects of education, and it's become cultural and discriminatory. It was thought thought that if you didn't go to and not only go to higher education, but go to a prestigious school as opposed to a regular college, and it works all the way up and down the line. And the truth is, if you have good teachers and you have good students who want to learn, that works anywhere. And we all have different levels of interest, and I think that we're getting back to what I think is reality in education. The one area in higher education where we really need to do some work is in our community and technical colleges. Basically, I would characterize them as junior colleges now, where you get a 2-year degree. And that was not the vision for those schools. They were set up to be responders to needs for business and industry, to be able to create programs quickly, delete programs, and create new programs. And instead, they've settled into regular 2-year degree programs with tenured faculty, and that has not helped meet those needs for mechanics, welders, and engineers that we keep hearing about. So, you know, again, we could talk forever about what's going on and what's needed, but at least people are discussing it now and being honest about it, and I think we're going to see some changes. But I think it's a great waste if we do not allow students from our vocational centers to move right on in smoothly into the community college system. I gave one example to some folks not long ago. I worked some with the Job Squad and vocational rehabilitation in Bridgeport. We had a returning veteran who was a master welder in the military, and he's out now, and he wants to get certified as a welder in West Virginia. He wanted to enroll in the community college to get that certificate. And they told him that he would have to attend for 2 years in order to get that certificate. And he probably knew more welding than most of the instructors he had. And that's just, you know, you can't really justify this. We need to break down some of those barriers. And I think the time is right to do it.
I think we're going to see some of that in this legislative session. Alternative paths to different certifications.
Yeah. Anything else?
If I had to say one thing that'll probably kick in pretty quick, it will be what the counties are going to do with reading. And many of the speakers over and over talked about this. If you can't read by the time you're in the 3rd grade, you're doomed, whether you want to go on to a vocational school or college or what. And they had one speaker that she is in a nonprofit corporation with a lawyer from Wheeling. He had one of the largest law firms in the world. And the lawyer and her, she had developed a thing in life that she wanted to devote the rest of her life to reading. And the question came up, okay, say you start a big push in reading, how long will it take you to see results? And she said 3 to 5 years. We don't have 3 to 5 years to plan, so if we have to start something pretty darn quick, I'd hope it'd be reading right down in preschool.
Yes, and Sandra Day O'Connor, if you followed, she has taken on that as a project to improve reading all across the country. As we all know, that's an essential tool for whatever we do in learning. Well, it's
Who, I might add, and I got this information off the educational channel, but I think it applies, is they have found out that our kids right now have, I don't know if they've sort of isolated themselves because of all the electronic gadgets that we've got now, but they really lack social skills. They talked to a fella, and it was his job to interview people for a job. And he said he found out that a lot of kids with college degrees could not express themselves. They can't carry on a conversation. They really lack social skills, and I think another thing that we're going to have to get back to is comprehension, because we have kids now that can come up with an answer, but don't have a clue how they got that answer. They can't comprehend, and I know, I'm around my grandkids and stuff a lot, and I can tell you comprehension and the social skills, I think they have went downhill over the last several years. You know, when people just don't stand and talk to each other anymore, they text each other all the time.
Social media.
And, they use the one example on this show that the husband and wife, he was in one end of the house, she's on the other end of the house, and they text each other back and forth all the time, you know.
Well, I sat beside a lady at a professional meeting not very many months ago, and all the time I was there listening, she was sitting there texting, and I don't think she heard a word that was said. But we see this over and over again, and you know, I've graded enough essays that I know that a computer can't grade an essay and know anything, and it's really laughable when you see what a computer will do with an essay. And I think I told you about one that had the same 2 words written for a whole page, and it got a passing score. All right, well, very good. I'm sure we're going to have many more discussions on this subject. This is just the beginning. Okay, item 5, trip requests, and you have a copy of a trip request before you.
And I think probably another 6 or 8 of them already. Definitely.
Okay. So we really don't have any we have to approve tonight.
Yes, that and what you
And a
had.
couple of the others, okay. Do I hear a motion that we approve the trip request as presented?
I make the motion.
All right.
I've got one question. If there's no indication here how it's gonna be paid for, they're taking care of the
Usually most of these
themselves.
are, I noticed that this would be out of their excess levy fund.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, motion approved. Item 6, consent agenda. Mr. Blankenship.
Just be willing to answer questions on those if you have any.
Okay, hearing none. Item 7, superintendent reports.
Dr. Simmons and I have talked about this. One of the things you have in your packet underneath that line there, that item is it's a copy of our plan to roll out the Common Core. And Dr. Simmons was mentioning earlier that Risa is going to be one of the prime players. Basically, what you'll find here is just our plan, how we're going to get teachers trained, and how we're going to get them back to their own counties and train their peers. And I think Dr. Simmons got a few comments he wants to make on that, but would say that we're planning to have one of the research specialists come down, so we're working with this plan, and present to us and answer your questions as far as the actual rollout itself.
Yes, I think that, you know, I hear discussion out and about over, you know, who should really have taken on doing the training and taking the lead, but for whatever, RESA 7 has that responsibility, and I think in my work with RESA 7, they have some highly capable people, and I think they will do a good job in doing the training for teachers and school personnel, as well as informing board members. I think while board members are not teaching in the classrooms and we're not intimately involved in the day-to-day details, I think it's very important that we understand the nature of the changes that are coming, what our responsibilities are as a board in assuring that these standards are implemented and being carried out as proposed. And so I think sometime in the next 2 or 3 months at the latest, we need to have you know, sort of an in-service training session on what is involved in the training, how they propose to train our elementary teachers, and then how they're going to unfold the rest of the training, including talking with us about how this impacts school board members in the future. I know we're relatively far down on the list when it comes to that schedule, but if we're going to be those who are held accountable for seeing that the school system works as it should, then we're going to have to understand the scope and nature of these standards. And it is going to require a good deal of training. As I think I said last time, the standards for reading and language arts have been agreed upon. Math, not yet, because there's still some things to be ironed out, but that will be done in the next few months. As I understand it, Mr. Blankenship, not every state in the country has bought into Common Core, but I think the majority of states have. So we need to understand what's going to be measured, what we're expected to perform in the classrooms, what our reading teachers should be doing in, preschool right on through elementary school. And that grade 3 is very important because if kids don't learn to read by that time, they have serious problems with reading. So we do need, as a board, we need to understand the implications for the whole system of public schools. And I think we want to have someone from RESA 7 to come and talk with us, as well as the curriculum people from the central office. So we're going to plan that in the very near future.
Is this training going to be during school hours, or how are they going to work that?
The handful of people that each county has chosen will be trained mid-April. And then the others, we're going to be using a series of workshops during the summer, as well as the ISE days next year, early release time. Any opportunities we have, we're going to be using that for training purposes. But the initial training will happen 2 days for elementary in April and 2 days for secondary.
I think the goals, 3 goals, are spelled out on the first page here, and I think there are 2 or 3 just key things. The foundational shifts in thinking, that's important. Understanding what students are expected to know and be able to do so and understand under the new standards. And then certainly we have to have the evidence that the students are indeed demonstrating and understanding. So those are the 3 goals that are encompassed. But that's going to take, over the next several months, it's going to involve training of school personnel. But I think it's important to us as a board that we have a good overview of what this encompasses, and so we'll plan to have such a meeting in the near future. And I certainly don't have all the answers. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But again, this, I went to a recent meeting last month, and this is laid on the table.
May I ask a question? Seems like the community is being left out of all this. Does the community not have any role to play in this whole thing? I think the parents of these students should be made aware of what's happening in the school system.
Oh, I agree.
When I sat back, and I don't see anything emanating from the school board to direct the parents about what's taking place, and math, reading, or anything else.
Well, I agree. We just got this last month, and it's just getting underway. I think we can talk about, a number of things that I agree that not everybody knows in every instance what's going on. This is going to be something that will require a lot of public relations, I think, on the part of the state to get the public to understand this shift in expectations, not only in student performance, but in letting the public know that your child may not get an A in a class that you want him to get it in. He's going to be measured based on performance. And so we're gonna take a lot of the socialization out of it, where in many instances, unrealistic grades were given where the performance was not in keeping with the grade. And I know the pressures that come with it. I saw it in college. I'll have to admit I was giving students A's that when Dave Ramazan was in school would have been a C. Because over that period of time, the perspective and the expectations changed. It did not happen in 1 year. It happened over a 10 or 15-year period, and it happens gradually. And I think you're right. We're going to have a big PR job, but before we can do that, we have to know what we're talking about.
I think also what the legislature decides in this session is going to impact some of this.
Right.
Sure will. So we're not.
And in response to that, in response to Mr. Huff, I agree with you totally. And one thing I will say is remember that the state appears from everything I am reading to be putting the responsibility for communication to the public. They're laying it on the local board's shoulders. Things seem to be going down, and I just think it's something you need to be aware of and look into more. Because if we don't hear from our local boards, we do not hear. Unless it's in the Charleston Gazette, we do not hear.
I understand. I think right now, Carl, what was the word I heard Friday? Chaotic?
I agree with what the statements you've made. But the thing that I walked away as, someone asked me, well, how could you summarize what you heard this week? And there were excellent sessions. But these key people who got up there, they are going through the same thing that we're going through. It is chaotic. They're dealing with the legislature. They're trying to understand the legislation. They're trying to work with these new standards. And if their life depended on it, you couldn't get 5 people on one of those boards or committees to agree on what the approach is. The bottom line is it's evolving as we speak, and I would say in the next month or 2 we'll have solid information out. And we can't wait for Charleston to do it, to get the word out. I think we're going to have to figure out what we can do locally, and I think our biggest challenge will be to get the parents involved so they'll know what's going to take place. And if a child doesn't have the parents backing them, the child is going to suffer very seriously. So if anybody knows how to get the parents involved from early childhood on to help us prepare for what's coming, Gilmer County can profit immensely.
And if and when you read the evaluation form for superintendents that is put out by the state, you will see that there's a lot of concentration in evaluating the superintendent's ability to communicate not only to the parents but to the community, time and time again, on various evaluation criteria that is there, whether it meets standards, exceeds standards, or does not meet standards. And it needs to come from the board in some form.
I'd like to make a comment. I do agree with Mr. Hoff and Dr. Armour. Where I got my education, you had the student and you had the teachers and parents. Teachers and parents, they were always together. We're here, that's what is lacking. In other words, when I was a student, I had to make sure that I didn't do anything wrong because either my parents or my teachers would have told each other. Okay, they supported each other. And that's where it's lacking, and that's why I agree, when they're making all these decisions, they should not leave the parents out, because that's 50% of the problem. I mean, you can make all the decisions, but if you don't take them into play and you don't have their backing and support and change that culture, you're never going to succeed.
Yeah. Well, one of the participants in the conference, it's from a county, not Gilmer, but this person said that, we deal with parents, kids from homes where no one works. They don't know what working at a job means. And that's why I said earlier, this is a major cultural problem. It's major. And for whatever it's worth, I tried to write an article, but now, Denver, you left out my quotation about sailing in a blanket of comfort until you sink. At any rate, I'm writing an article on poverty, petty politics, and schools. Because I see, when I talk with people about why they leave Gilmer County, they'll tell you it's the petty politics, it's the bad economy, and we want better schools. Now, yes, I believe that. I'm going to go to the economic development meeting this Thursday, and I'm going to stand up and say those things because it's true. I've been around here long enough to know, and Dave is exactly right. How do we get parents involved in their children's education? I don't propose to have the answer. I didn't have that problem at home. My mom and dad knew what we were doing, and we would not do anything to embarrass them. We have to understand that was then, and we're dealing with a lot of different issues now. One of the things we're going to need, I could sit down and write an article every other day because it takes me a whole day to type one. I'm still a hunt and peck typist because that's what I do. I can't do that because after a while I get saturated with it. But we are going to have to do a little better job of letting people know what is happening and what we expect to do. I would agree. But I know that Ron doesn't have an excess of personnel in the county office. So somehow we're going to have to figure out a way to do a better job. I agree with you. And it's a never-ending job because things continually change as they pass around in the community. The one thing that we know all over the state as we meet in these statewide meetings, people are a little angry and they're a little frustrated. You know, I hate to tell you, this what we're dealing with is not unique to us. It's being felt in almost all of our counties. I sat beside a superintendent in a county that has been taken over, given back, taken over, and given back. And to add to their woes, they're $2.5 million in the hole. Now, you know, what do you do in a case like that? Gilmer County has a chance to actually take advantage of these new standards. We're small enough. We have a chance to be way ahead of the crowd in terms of what we do with student achievement. As long as I'm on this board, that's where I'm sighted in. But it is not going to happen in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. It's going to take this board understanding our goals and understanding what's expected, and it's going to take us reaching out into the community. And I think that it's going to take everyone here in this county holding hands. If we all held hands, we'd still have an uphill battle. Because the economy, I don't see getting better. I don't know what would make it get better. And so we have to start with where we are. I would like to see a public works program here. I'd like to see people have a job, even if it's public money. And Lord knows there is enough to do. So what we hear you. And I think I can quote Chaucer, "Patience is a high virtue certain. Patience is a high virtue." It's hard to do. But we are in a period of time of transition, and we have to be a little patient with each other. But believe me, I think we understand, and it's going to take us a little while. But communication, yes, that's a key. And on the new standards, when we know more, we can tell you more. We don't want to roll out something here and find out 2 months from now, hey, we've changed our mind. So a lot depends on what the legislature does. If they don't do anything, then we're kind of back where we started. If they do what we hope, then we got a chance to make a lot of substantive and meaningful changes. But yes, we're gonna have some meetings. We're gonna have to get out as we did on the renewal of the excess levy and talk to people, but hopefully we'll get a lot more people involved.
I think, the Common Core standards you talked about a while ago, you know, I think those, everybody recognizes that they were not, just every child left behind and so forth, those different things that we're trying to do, I think everybody recognizes that they were a failure. Well, I'm hearing a lot of different school systems around Pennsylvania where my grandchildren go, and Baltimore where I taught for a long time. There had different spheres of levels of for English or math or whatever you're talking about. You might have 16 or 18 spheres of levels of for English, and if you don't, you're not held that back by your social influences, but you're held back by the ability to read or math skills or something like that. But you have an opportunity to make them up in the same year. You might be taking 2 math classes, or 2 periods of math and 2 periods of English and so forth, to make them up in the same year. We have so many social classes going on right now that we're wasting so much money on social issues that children sometimes laugh at us.
I agree. The same thing is true of higher education. You know, the cost of going to college now it's astronomical. You know, and a realistic person, if he gets out of college and is in debt $15,000 or $20,000, and that's a small amount today, and takes a $30,000 a year job, he's not going to be having a very new car to drive, and it's going to be renting for a long time before that's paid off. And our young people are smart, and if they figure this all out, and you know, a business can price itself out of business, and schools, if they're not careful, are going to price themselves out of the market. And I think that there's a lot yet to happen, but I think that the dust is going to settle, and we're going to have a lot more realism. And I think when the math standards they finally emerge, we see a little bit of them, there are going to be students spending long hours in math classes.
I think there'll be a lot of application to the math, being able to apply it to real life scenarios more so than just memorizing a formula. How will this apply? And I think you're going to see a lot more in-depth, not so broad, but deep learning.
Right.
The application part is a critical part.
Right.
Students, they learn better if they're hands-on, if they're active. If you show them a practical application for what you're trying to teach them, and that's part of the problem with mathematics. You know, if they're in a carpentry class, they learn math pretty quickly. They're applying what they're learning.
Right.
You don't do that in a regular math class.
And just like Dr. D'Antoni had spoke about, if you had asked a student maybe in construction if they could find a slope, well, that might just completely throw them off course. But if you ask them to find the pitch, that's a whole different concept. It's the same learning skill, just different verbiage. And you know, you get past that barrier, then they're going to understand. Well, they are doing higher math. You know, it's just got different words to it. So.
Well, this doesn't have to do with higher math. I guess in a way it does. One thing she also talked about was the new approach they're using to get children to home in on quickly what they want to do out of life. And instead of going after them and say, well, what do you want to be? It's an entirely different approach, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. They go in and they ask the children, okay, what do you want? Do you want to eat in a good restaurant, or do you want to go to McDonald's all the time? Do you want a new car, or do you want a used car? Do you want to live in a certain kind of house, or do you want another house? And it's the first time the children are faced with having to think about how much things cost. And then after they tabulate this, they'll go and say, okay, now based on what you like out of life, you're going to make $80,000 a year. Okay, now, what are you going to do? And often, the way the trades are now, there's a choice. They're going to be an electrician or a plumber or a pipeliner. They can make that much money. They won't make it if they get a non-marketable degree. They may be working in McDonald's or Wendy's. So it's a whole new concept to get young people to think about reality in terms, okay, now what do you want out of life and how are you going to get it? And the whole key is education.
Too much fantasy, haven't there been? Far too much fantasy.
And what they have found many times in looking at college graduates is a lot of times you go to college, graduate with a 4-year degree, and you never use it. So,
Or they get $20,000 a year.
and at the with a big price tag too. Whereas if you hone in at an early age on what maybe some of their interests and likes are, they may be able to obtain that with a high school diploma.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, when we started with the choosing an area of interest in the 8th grade years ago.
Oh, really?
That's what that was for. Trying to get students involved early on to decide, well, what am I going to have to take in school if I want to be whatever? That's a little bit of reality at that point.
Yeah.
It's not worked real well.
I think too, from what I understood, the track that it's going, you ought to be familiar with it. You went to school in the 50s. Because they're about ready to dial it back to about the 50s and 60s.
That's what we need. We need reading, writing, arithmetic, you know.
Yeah.
The 4 major subjects and emphasize those major things that we have to get through life. And these other social skills, they're extraneous things that we pick up. Some of them we pick up outside the school anyway.
There's a vast number of kids right now, a lot of them are college graduates, that doesn't have a clue how to balance a checkbook. You know, I run into one not very long ago. She just writes a check and she never subtracts it. I mean, how do you, until she gets a notice from the bank, and then she realizes, okay, now I went too far. Okay, now that cost her $40 or whatever it is, and then, you know, but
That's reality.
that is reality, and be surprised how many of them, you know, and it's not really their fault. With somewhere, we lost common sense approach to education.
But we have to remember, most of us, at a much earlier age, were thrust into responsible actions. We all had jobs around the house or on the farm. We had chores that we had to do. So we learned a certain amount of adult responsibility before we got out of college or graduated from high school. And I remember the checkbook thing because I earned a little money in the hayfield and put it in the bank, and I told my mom that I wanted one of those checkbooks, and I thought you could just go out and write all you wanted to out of it.
My daughter had that same idea.
Well, I think this has been very good, and I hope maybe we're going to be able to do more such discussions because, again, the more we understand about where we're going, I think the more effective it's going to be. Anything else, Mr. Superintendent?
No, sir?
That covers it.
All right, next we have delegations, and I would remind you that we hope that 3 to 5 minutes will be sufficient. And Norma Hurley.
Okay, well, first off, I hope it doesn't take us 5 years to find out that we haven't gone any further than we have in the last 20. So let's pray. Thank you, Mr. Huff, for being here. This is the most conversation I've heard out of 3 of our board members in a long time. It's nice to hear them speak and hear their opinions. I would like to say one thing, Dr. Simmons. You've hit about what I wanted to say, kind of on the head, although you didn't intend to. Communications. I was most shocked at the last meeting to discover that communications apparently had not been occurring between all 5 of our board members. I would say to you that that's the most important thing in the world. Whether you agree, you disagree, it does not matter. Each and every one needs to be talking because Dr. Simmons specifically as president speaks as the voice of the board. Has to be the entire board. And I hope that is corrected. I hope such conduct and such things never happen again. To go on to petty politics. there's a lot of petty politics, some of them local, but some of them I'm finding very disturbing at the state level. People talk of no-bid contracts. And I got to looking into that a little bit because I want to do that when I don't know something about a subject. I like to find out what's going on. And I found a little pattern that I found disturbing. Former State Superintendent David Stewart left our office in 2005. He went to work for ZMM Architectural and Engineering, who had done millions of dollars of business with the public education system during his tenure. Then in 2011, Stephen Payne leaves. Stephen Payne goes to McGraw-Hill, who currently already had a large contract with the state of West Virginia, and specifically, besides their normal publishing, did our West tests. November of 2012, which is just this past year, he leaves and goes to N-Grade. N-Grade, which is a program we're using throughout the schools. They offer us free and paid versions, and the teachers use it for various purposes, and it's a way of keeping track of report cards, standardized test score analysis, parent mail, parent-teacher conference, attendance, discipline. It has a wide array of features, and typically the initial soiree into a school system by N-Grade is free. They went to Randolph County, who happens to be there, but Dr. Payne's son as Director of Technology, and James Ferris as the superintendent. West Virginia, for some reason, wound up paying $2 a student. The most interesting thing I find about that is as you go past that, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, every person has to look into their own heart as to why they do things. I think it's very questionable. I think someone should have recused themselves from that and said you need to go to the school system, but that's an ethical problem and that's on them. But N-Grade now, users start off with the free product, although we pay $2 a student in Randolph County, and it has since spread to other counties. But the N-Grade Plus, which is the upgrade, is now starting at $600 for each student for any school over 100 that wishes to use it. So it's a very lucrative process coming into the state educational system and having that type of reference to it. Dr. Payne does not deny that he goes and speaks to various agencies, including RISA, regarding these products. He merely says he does not sell them. I have a problem with that. Then we go to look and we find out, well, how are these people affiliated? And then I find them, oddly enough, I find ZMM Architects and Engineering, I find N-Grade, and another, what seems to be no-bid contractor we're all aware of, Williamson and Shriver Architects, Inc., are all platinum sponsors of the West Virginia Association of School Administrators, who deals directly with the SBA. So I see a serious issue here. I see obvious political, what do you call it? Political playing, people making a personal profit. And that's at the state level. We don't have to go local. You'll also find Thresher is on there. You know, they're well known for our PSD projects. And they have worked on school projects as well, Thresher Engineering. You know, these people are definitely finding their way in. Why would they be a platinum sponsor of our school administrators when they work directly with the SBA determining facilities and they work on facilities? Is that appropriate? Is it appropriate they get these contracts with no bids? Williamson and Shriver was paid to assist with the CEFP. They were paid and paid in full. How did they automatically become the builder, the design builder? There's no contract signed with them, but automatically it went right to them. That CEFP plan had nothing to do with who would be the builder. It was a CEFP plan. It was a facilities plan. It was due, needed to be done, and apparently they did it because their cover sheet's on it. And that's fine and dandy. They were paid for it. But this type of thing is certainly politically driven. I was very disappointed because had I known, I would have been down there today, but I had searched for that meeting but could not find it. But Mr. Blankenship, as you know, told me that he attended the SBA meeting for our schools today and made a short presentation. I'm aware that they are short. I know they don't give you a lot of time. And so we wait till April to see if we get the one new school. 509 students, only 395 scheduled for this new school. Even at that, we would have a school for 240 and one for 155 if we took those 395 and did two schools, which was what we should have done to get the travel times in correctly for our students. that would have made sense. But no, we didn't do that, not fiscally. I don't find it fiscally responsible. And then again, we have to bear the cost not only of bringing everyone else into one school, but taking students over to Lewis County. That's going to be money. If you just forget about the kids, it's money. And money that we need to be conservative of. As you well know, the economy is bad. As you well know, the state asked everyone to come, the governor, and go in at 7.5% less on their budget this year. There was a reason for that. You know, and that's why it concerns me about these contractors, because the school board, or the Department of Education and the school board, etc., has the largest budget of any single entity in this state. So where do people target for money, and where do they try to find their ends, and where do they headhunt for their employees? It makes sense for them. It doesn't make good ethics to me. So in closing, that's basically what I wanted to say. I really think, I wanted to point out another thing in the School Building Authority analysis of construction grant allocations to counties. Calhoun County did get 2 schools. Okay, they did receive almost $6 million towards the Arnoldsburg School. The bonds were to do their match. Okay, so that's the second school that Calhoun County received. I talked to Mr. Ed Toman in Ritchie County, and it was regarding an issue regarding his rehiring. I wanted to check on the minutes in which that had taken place. It was neither here nor there, and he phoned me. And he said, I'm going to take those Gilmer County students. Ritchie County needs them, because we were talking about his small school that had been rebuilt for 93 students, remodeled. He said, I can't keep up that 93 attendance. He said, I don't even have enough for that. He said, I want Gilmer County students. I said, well, actually, aren't they dedicated to Lewis County? He says, if I get a school bus, watch me. You know, and that's all very well and funny, except when you hear that, you know, Pickens built a school with 5 classrooms, it was SBA funded. That remodeling in Ritchie County was SBA funded. We shouldn't have to throw all of our children into one school that is not suited to get them in within the appropriate timelines, within the law of this state, and then tell the outlying counties, well, you can have them. And if that isn't politically driven to hurt the economy and the people of Gilmer County, I don't know what is. Because now the competition is for every dollar you can get for a student. When the $1,400 went away, it is a competition. When I have an adult man sitting telling me quite vehemently, he's glad Gilmer County was taken over. And he wasn't teasing. He was dead serious. You know, and this is the voices we're hearing. These are the people who are supposed to be in leadership, and this is what the SBA is kneeling to. You know, I just don't think the assessment of the situation is actually what it needs to be. We have people who are more intelligent than that. And whether or not you get a job with the state to look to your future, your job with the state is to look to our future if you work here. Worry about your future down the line. I'm sure someone will pick you up if they think you can bring them back in and get them a contract. That's pretty obvious. History shows it as recently as November 2012. That was 4 months ago. But right now, they have to worry about us.
I think, Norma,
That's fine, sir,
I
fine time.
understand what you're saying, but what you're saying needs to be dealt with at the level of the State Attorney General and the
I agree,
Office of
and I have an
Governor,
appointment to
because
see
this
him.
county